Jasmine Crockett walked into the CNN studio knowing Ann Coulter was waiting to tear her apart on live television. What happened in the next 18 minutes didn't just silence the controversial conservative pundit, it created the most viral political moment of 2025. And may have just launched a new Democratic superstar. The 33-year-old Texas Congresswoman had been called everything from DEA hire to unqualified freshman by conservative media. Fox News hosts had spent weeks building up tonight's showdown, with Sean Hannity calling it the night Ann Coulter schools another woke Democrat. Tucker Carlson had dedicated an entire segment to previewing what he called Coulter's inevitable destruction of the Texas rookie. Conservative Twitter was buzzing with anticipation, already crafting victory memes before the confrontation even began. But tonight on Anderson Cooper 360, Crockett was about to turn Ann Coulter's own words into weapons that would leave the 62-year-old pundit speechless and trending for all the wrong reasons. This wasn't going to be another conservative victory lap. This was going to be a masterclass in preparation versus performance that would shift the entire political landscape. The backstory made this confrontation even more significant. Just 2 weeks earlier, Coulter had appeared on Joe Rogan's podcast, specifically targeting young Democratic women in Congress. These diversity hires think they can compete intellectually, she had said, generating millions of views. Put any of them in a real debate with me, and they'll crumble in 5 minutes. When Rogan asked who she'd most like to debate, Coulter didn't hesitate. That Jasmine Crockett from Texas, she's the perfect example of everything wrong with the modern Democratic Party. The challenge had been thrown down publicly, viewed by over 10 million people. Democratic strategists, privately worried about putting their rising star against the woman who had destroyed careers with surgical precision for over 2 decades. But Crockett had personally requested the booking, telling her chief of staff, "Sometimes you have to fight the bully to show others how it's done." Before we dive into this explosive confrontation that's already breaking the internet, make sure to hit that subscribe button and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. You won't want to miss what happens when preparation meets opportunity on live TV. The studio lights dimmed as both women took their positions. Coulter, confident as always in her black blazer, expected an easy target. Crockett, calm and composed in royal blue, had other plans. This wasn't just going to be a debate, it was about to become a masterclass in political combat that would change everything. To understand why this confrontation mattered so much, you need to know who these two women really are and what they represent in American politics today. Ann Coulter has been a conservative lightning rod for over 2 decades. The author of 13 best-selling books, she's made a career out of provocative statements and taking down Democrats with sharp wit and brutal honesty. At 62, she's a veteran of countless political battles, from defending Trump to attacking liberal policies. Her followers see her as a fearless truth-teller. Her critics call her a divisive provocateur, but everyone agrees, she knows how to win debate. Coulter's preparation for this interview had been minimal. She'd spent the morning at a Manhattan spa, then had lunch with her publisher to discuss her upcoming book tour. "I don't need to prepare for some rookie congresswoman," she told her assistant. "I've been doing this since she was in middle school." Her confidence was absolute. She'd destroyed seasoned senators, governors, and presidential candidates. A second-term House member from Texas seemed like easy prey. Her strategy was simple and proven: attack credentials, question intelligence, make it personal, then watch the opponent get emotional and lose control. She'd used this formula hundreds of times. It never failed. Coulter arrived at CNN that night fresh off a week of attacking young Democratic politicians. She'd already taken shots at AOC, criticized Ilhan Omar, and declared that the new generation of Democrats was all style, no substance. Her target list had one more name: Jasmine Crockett. She'd even tweeted earlier that day, "Looking forward to tonight's educational session with Jasmine for us.
Time for a reality check."
The tweet got 50,000 likes from conservatives eager to watch another liberal get dismantled. Jasmine Crockett represents everything Coulter claims to oppose. At 33, she's one of the youngest members of Congress, representing Texas's 30th district. A former civil rights attorney and Dallas City Council member, she's been in Congress for just over 2 years. But in that short time, she's made waves with her sharp questioning during committee hearings and her ability to break down complex legal issues in ways regular people understand. But what the public didn't know was how Crockett had spent the previous 2 weeks preparing for this moment. While Coulter was doing spa treatments and book meetings, Crockett was pulling all-nighters in her congressional office. She'd assembled a team of researchers who compiled every Coulter book, column, interview, and social media post from the past 5 years. They'd identified inconsistencies, factual errors, and contradictions. They'd prepared response documents for every possible line of attack. Crockett's team had also done something Coulter's hadn't. They'd studied hours of Coulter's recent interviews to identify her pattern. They knew she typically opened with credential attacks, moved to personal insults around the 5-minute mark, and tried to end debates with what she thought were devastating one-liners. They'd prepared counter-strategies for each phase. Most importantly, they'd prepared something Coulter wouldn't expect, a detailed file of Coulter's own contradictions, failed predictions, and embarrassing moments. If Coulter wanted to make this about qualifications and credibility, Crockett was ready to have that conversation. The stakes couldn't have been higher. This wasn't just about two women with different politics. This was about generational change in American politics. Old guard versus new blood. Experience versus fresh energy. Conservative establishment versus progressive future. Coulter had spent years building her reputation by taking down politicians who weren't ready for her attacks. She'd made careers disappear with a single devastating soundbite. Tonight she was hunting for another scalp. But Crockett wasn't just any freshman congresswoman. She'd graduated from Rhodes College and received her law degree from University of Houston Law Center. She'd spent years in courtrooms facing hostile judges and opposing counsel. She'd won cases that seemed impossible. She knew how to fight under pressure. The question wasn't whether Coulter would attack. Everyone knew she would. The question was whether Crockett was ready for the fight of her political life. As Anderson Cooper introduced both guests, the tension was already built. Conservative viewers tuned in expecting Coulter to demolish another young Democrat. Progressive viewers worried their rising star was about to get destroyed on national television. Neither side was prepared for what actually happened. The first few minutes started exactly as everyone expected. Anderson Cooper set up the discussion about Democratic messaging and the 2024 election aftermath. His voice carrying the weight of someone who had moderated countless political showdowns. The CNN studio, with its familiar red, white, and blue backdrop, felt charged with electricity as both women settled into their positions. Coulter, sitting confidently with her signature smirk, adjusted her black blazer and immediately went into attack mode. She had done this dance thousands of times before. The opening was always crucial. Establish dominance early, make the opponent defensive, then exploit any sign of weakness. Anderson, the problem with today's Democratic Party is they keep electing people based on demographics instead of qualifications, Coulter began, her voice dripping with familiar disdain. Her media training was evident in every word: perfect posture, direct eye contact with the camera, the kind of confident delivery that had made her a conservative icon. She paused for effect, letting the accusation hang in the air before delivering the personal blow. And Congresswoman Crockett here is a perfect example. She's been in Congress for what, 5 minutes? And now she's supposed to be some kind of spokesperson for the party. The CNN studio suddenly felt smaller, the tension palpable. Crockett sat quietly in her royal blue blazer, taking notes on a yellow legal pad, the same kind she'd used during her years as a defense attorney. Her pen moved steadily across the paper, seemingly unbothered by the attack beginning to unfold. Conservative viewers watching at home began reaching for their phones, ready to share clips of what they expected would be another Coulter demolition job. MAGA Twitter accounts started preparing victory tweets. Fox News control rooms monitored the feed, ready to pull sound bites for their evening shows. I mean, let's be honest, Coulter pressed on, now looking directly at Crockett with the predatory focus of someone who had built a career destroying political opponents. What exactly are your qualifications to be lecturing Americans about anything? You won one local election, then got handed a safe Democratic seat. You've passed exactly 0 significant legislation. You're basically a social media influencer with a congressional ID. The attack was vintage Coulter, personal, dismissive, designed to provoke an emotional response. It was the same formula she'd used to humiliate countless Democrats over 2 decades. In the control room, CNN producers leaned forward, expecting Crockett to either get angry or defensive. Either reaction would give Coulter more ammunition. Conservative Twitter erupted immediately. Coulter truth started trending within minutes. Fox News viewers began sharing clips before the segment even ended. Sean Hannity's producers were already pulling quotes for that evening's show. This was the Ann Coulter they loved: direct, brutal, and seemingly unstoppable. But then something unexpected happened that would change everything. Instead of getting defensive or emotional, Crockett simply smiled and continued taking notes. The camera caught her expression, calm, almost amused. It was the look of someone who knew something others didn't. Cooper tried to give Crockett a chance to respond, but Coulter wasn't finished. And another thing, Coulter continued, now clearly enjoying herself, these young Democrats keep talking about lived experience and representing their communities. But what experience? Jasmine here went straight from law school to city council to Congress. She's never run a business, never created jobs, never had to make a real payroll. How is she qualified to vote on economic policy affecting millions of Americans? The audience in the studio was dead silent. Even Cooper seemed surprised by how aggressive Coulter was being. This wasn't just political criticism, it felt personal. Coulter leaned forward, delivering what she clearly thought would be the knockout punch. Look, I've been doing this for over 20 years. I've written best-selling books, appeared on every major network, debated the best minds in politics. And this congresswoman thinks she can sit here and compete with that level of experience. It's almost adorable. That's when Crockett finally looked up from her notes. The smile was still there, but now her eyes had a different intensity. She set down her pen, adjusted her blazer, and leaned forward slightly. The camera caught the moment perfectly. This wasn't someone who was intimidated. This was someone who had been waiting for exactly this opportunity. Are you finished? She asked quietly, her Texas drawl barely detectable, but somehow carrying more authority than all of Coulter's shouting. The question hung in the air for a moment. Even the studio crew seemed to sense that something fundamental had just shifted. Coulter, clearly not expecting such a calm response, laughed, but it sounded forced, nervous even. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I hurt your feelings? This is exactly what I mean. Your generation can't handle direct criticism. Cooper jumped in, sensing the tension was about to explode. Congresswoman Crockett, how do you respond to Ms. Coulter's assessment of your qualifications? The camera zoomed in on Crockett's face. She paused for exactly 3 seconds, just long enough to make millions of viewers lean forward in anticipation. What happened next would become one of the most replayed moments in political television history. Well, Anderson, Crockett began, her voice steady and measured, carrying the confidence of someone who had spent countless hours in courtrooms, facing hostile questioning. I have to say, listening to Ms. Coulter tonight reminds me of something my grandmother used to tell me growing up in Dallas. Coulter rolled her eyes dramatically, playing to her bass. Oh great, here comes the folksy wisdom. Crockett ignored the interruption completely, maintaining eye contact with Cooper as if Coulter hadn't spoken. She used to say, baby, when someone has to tear you down to build themselves up, you know they're standing on shaky ground. The first crack in Coulter's armor appeared, a slight tightening around her eyes, a barely perceptible shift in her posture. For someone who built a career reading people and exploiting weaknesses, she was showing her own. But Crockett was just getting started. Ms. Coulter, you've spent the last 5 minutes listing your achievements from 20 years ago, questioning my qualifications, and making assumptions about my background. But here's what's interesting. You got almost every fact about me wrong. Coulter shifted in her chair, her confident smirk beginning to fade. The studio audience sensed something changing. Even the camera operators adjusted their positions to get better angles. I think I know how to research. Coulter started defensively. Do you? Crockett interrupted smoothly, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent years in courtrooms. Because you said I went straight from law school to city council. But I actually spent 6 years practicing civil rights law, including 3 years as a public defender, representing people who couldn't afford attorneys. You know, real people with real problems. The camera caught Coulter's face as this information. Her eyes narrowed slightly, the first sign that she realized she might be in trouble. She opened her mouth to respond, but Crockett wasn't giving her the chance. During those years as a public defender, Ms. Coulter, I represented over 400 clients. Single mothers facing eviction, veterans struggling with PTSD who'd been arrested for minor infractions, teenagers from broken homes who made mistakes but deserved second chances. I didn't just read about criminal justice reform in books. I lived it every day in Dallas County courtroom. The audience was completely silent now, hanging on every word. Even Anderson Cooper seemed transfixed by the transformation happening before his eyes. And you want to know something interesting about that experience? Crockett continued, her Texas accent becoming slightly more pronounced as her passion grew. It taught me something your 20-year career in punditry apparently hasn't. That real qualifications aren't measured by how many books you've sold or how many TV shows you've appeared on. They're measured by whether you can deliver results for people who are counting on you. The studio audience began to murmur. Cooper leaned forward, sensing the shift in momentum like a shark smelling blood in the water. "You said I've never run a business," Crockett continued, her voice gaining strength with each word. "But I actually founded my own law practice at 28 years old. Not with family money or political connections, with a $50,000 loan I had to personally guarantee. I hired staff, made payroll every month for 4 years, handled everything from employment law to housing discrimination cases. When you talk about real-world experience, Ms. Coulter, I'm curious, when's the last time you had to worry about making payroll? When's the last time you had to look a client in the eye and tell them you'd fight for them, knowing that if you failed, they'd lose their home?" The energy in the room was shifting dramatically. What had started as an execution was becoming something entirely different. Conservative viewers at home began shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Liberal viewers started reaching for their phones to record what was happening. "You said I've passed 0 significant legislation." Crockett pressed on, now in complete control of the narrative. "But last year alone I helped pass 3 bills that are now law. The Veterans Healthcare Access Act that expanded mental health services for veterans in rural areas. The Small Business Recovery Grant Program that kept 2,000 businesses open in my district during the economic downturn. And the Community Internet Initiative that brought high-speed internet to underserved neighborhoods, helping kids do homework and seniors access telehealth services." Coulter's face was growing redder by the second. She kept trying to interrupt, but Crockett's rhythm was unstoppable now, like a prosecutor building to her closing argument. Each of those bills required months of research, dozens of meetings with stakeholders, compromise with Republicans, and actual work in committees. Not television appearances, Ms. Coulter, not book signings, work, the kind of work that changes real people's lives in measurable ways. Coulter tried to interrupt, but Crockett wasn't stopping. "But here's the most interesting part, Ms. Coulter. You said I got handed a safe Democratic seat. But I actually defeated a 6-term incumbent in the primary by over 20 points. I knocked on 15,000 doors personally. I raised money from small donors while my opponent had corporate backing. I won because voters chose change over the status quo." The energy in the studio was completely different now. What started as an execution was becoming something else entirely. Coulter, clearly rattled but trying to maintain composure, shot back. "Look, those are all nice talking points." "Talking points." Crockett's voice rose slightly, the first sign of real emotion. The camera caught Coulter's face at that moment, the expression of someone who realized they had brought a knife to a gunfight. For the first time in her television career, Ann Coulter looked genuinely rattled. But Crockett delivered the final blow with devastating calm, turning to face the camera directly for her closing statement. "The people of Texas's 30th District didn't send me to Congress to trade insults on television. They sent me to solve problems. Healthcare costs, job creation, education funding, infrastructure investment, real issues that affect real families. But when someone questions my qualifications to serve them, I'm going to respond with facts. Every single time." She paused, looked back at Coulter, then returned to the camera. "Because that's what qualified public servants do. We show our work." Coulter sat in stunned silence as Cooper wrapped the segment, her usual rapid-fire comebacks, nowhere to be found. For the first time in recent memory, the woman who had built a career destroying opponents had been systematically dismantled on live television by someone who simply came more prepared. But the real show was just beginning. Within seconds of the segment ending, social media erupted like a volcano. Crockett Destroy Coulter began trending before the commercial break finished. But this wasn't just trending. It was becoming a cultural moment. The clip of Crockett asking who exactly is unqualified for this conversation hit 1 million views on Twitter within the first hour. TikTok exploded with reaction videos. Instagram stories flooded with the disappointed, quote, overlaid on photos of Coulter's shocked expression. But the real impact went far beyond social media metrics. Democratic Party officials who had watched the interview live immediately began reaching out. Within an hour, Crockett's congressional office received calls from CNN, MSNBC, ABC, NBC, and CBS, requesting interviews. Donors who had never heard of the Texas Congresswoman started contributing to her campaign fund. The contrast was stark. Coulter, who usually live-tweeted during her TV appearances, went completely silent. Her Twitter account remained dark for the first time in over a year. Conservative commentators who normally amplified her appearances were notably quiet. The immediate reactions told the story in real time. Republican strategist Rick Wilson tweeted, "That wasn't a debate. That was a masterclass in preparation versus performance." His tweet was retweeted 75,000 times within an hour. Liberal commentator Joy Reid posted, "Jasmine Crockett just showed the Democratic Party how to fight back, with facts, preparation, and unshakable confidence." The tweet included a clip of Crockett's disappointed line and racked up 200,000. Even conservative voices acknowledged what had happened, though many did so reluctantly. Ben Shapiro, no fan of Democrats, tweeted, "Regardless of politics, Crockett came prepared and Coulter did. That's the lesson here." When his own followers criticized him for the comment, he doubled down. "Facts don't care about your feelings, and the fact is Coulter got outworked." And the most unexpected reaction came from former Trump advisor Steve Bannon, who posted on his show's social media, "Say what you want about her politics, but that Crockett woman just put on a clinic." Coulter walked into a knife fight with a water balloon. The post was quickly deleted, but screenshots circulated for days. International media picked up the story within hours. The BBC ran a segment titled, "How an American Congresswoman Redefined Political Debate." The Guardian's headline read, "The Night Political Punditry Died. How Jasmine Crockett Killed the Coulter Formula." Le Monde in France analyzed it as a generational changing of the guard in American political discourse. But the most telling reaction came from someone unexpected. Former Republican strategist Steve Schmidt, who wrote a lengthy thread analyzing the exchange that was shared over 500,000 times. What we witnessed tonight wasn't just one politician outperforming another. It was a generational shift in how political discourse happens in America. For decades, conservative media has relied on the Coulter formula: make provocative attacks, force opponents into defensive positions, exploit emotional reactions for content. Crockett didn't just beat Coulter, she rendered her entire approach obsolete. This is what happens when preparation meets provocation. This is what happens when facts meet fiction. This is what the future of political communication looks like. Cable news bookers went into overdrive. Within 2 hours of the segment ending, Crockett's office had received formal interview requests from every major network and dozens of podcasts. The Daily Show reached out within minutes. Saturday Night Live's writers were already crafting sketches. The morning shows scrambled to book Crockett for follow-up interviews. Good Morning America, Today Show and Morning Joe all extended invitations within hours. Her congressional approval ratings, already solid in her district, jumped 12 points overnight according to early polling. But the ripple effects went beyond just one congresswoman's career. Democratic leadership took notice. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries called Crockett personally to congratulate her performance. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer mentioned her by name in a floor speech about the future of Democratic leadership. The contrast with Coulter's aftermath was striking. Her upcoming book tour saw 3 cancellations within. Her weekly column was delayed for editorial review, according to her publisher. Even Fox News, usually a reliable platform for Coulter, notably didn't invite her for follow-up commentary. Conservative media struggled to spin the exchange. Tucker Carlson's show didn't mention it at all. Sean Hannity briefly dismissed it as liberal media bias, but didn't show any clips. The silence was deafening from a movement that usually amplified Coulter's every appearance. Political analysts began calling it a paradigm shift moment. The old model of political combat, loud, provocative, fact-free attacks, had been systematically dismantled by someone who simply did their homework and stayed calm under pressure. Georgetown professor and political communications expert Maria Rodriguez summed it up. Coulter represents the old guard of political punditry, where controversy generated attention. Crockett represents something new, where competence and preparation generate respect. This exchange may mark the end of one era and the beginning of another. Meanwhile, Coulter's influence continued to wane. Her social media engagement dropped significantly. Her speaking fees, according to industry sources, decreased by nearly 30%. Several conservative organizations quietly removed her from upcoming events. The message was clear. The old model of political celebrity based on provocation without substance was dying. The new model rewarded preparation, competence, and the ability to stay calm under pressure while delivering devastating counterattacks. 3 months later, Crockett was named to the House Democratic leadership team, the youngest member in party history. She used her first leadership press conference to deliver a message that referenced her Coulter encounter without mentioning it directly. In politics, as in life, there are two ways to build yourself up. You can tear others down, or you can do the work. Democrats choose to do the work, but the transformation went deeper than just one politician's career trajectory. Political science professors began incorporating the Crockett-Coulter exchange into their curricula as an example of how effective political communication had evolved. The old model of loud emotional exchanges was being replaced by something more sophisticated, the ability to remain calm under attack while systematically dismantling an opponent's credibility with facts. Young Democratic politicians across the country started adopting what became known as the Crockett method: extensive preparation, fact-checking opponents' claims in real time, and responding to personal attacks with policy substance. Republican operatives privately admitted they were having to completely revise their attack strategies. The ripple effects extended beyond politics into corporate boardrooms and academic institutions. Business schools began teaching the exchange as an example of crisis communication excellence. Media training companies started offering Crockett-style preparation services to executives and public figures. 6 months after the interview, Crockett published a book titled Prepared: How Facts Beat Fiction in the Battle for America's Future. It became a New York Times bestseller within 2 weeks, outselling Coulter's most recent book by a margin of 3-1. The irony wasn't lost on political observers. The woman Coulter had called unqualified was now outselling the veteran author in the marketplace of ideas. The transformation was complete. A 33-year-old congresswoman had not only defended herself against a seasoned political attack artist, she had redefined what political courage looked like in modern America. More importantly, she had proven that in an era of information overload, the person who comes most prepared wins the conversation. The question now wasn't whether Jasmine Crockett had won a television debate. The question was whether this moment would inspire a new generation of politicians to choose facts over fury, preparation over provocation, and substance over spectacle. Based on the reaction from young Democratic politicians across the country, the answer was becoming clear. Jasmine Crockett hadn't just made history that night. She had shown the Democratic Party how to make history every day. The cultural impact extended far beyond politics. Business schools began analyzing the exchange as a case study in strategic communication under pressure. Harvard Business Review published an article titled The Crockett Method: How Preparation Defeats Provocation in High-Stakes Negotiations. Executive coaching firms started offering Crockett-style crisis communication training to Fortune 500 companies. The entertainment industry took notice as well. Netflix announced they were developing a limited series about young women in politics, with Crockett's story serving as inspiration. Hollywood agents reached out about book deals and speaking opportunities. The Washington Speakers Bureau reported that Crockett's speaking fee had increased by 400% virtually overnight. Educational institutions across the country began incorporating the exchange into their curriculum. High school debate coaches used it to teach students about preparation and staying calm under pressure. College communications professors assigned it as required viewing. Law schools analyzed it as an example of effective cross-examination techniques applied to media appearances. The international academic community embraced the moment as well. Oxford University's Center for American Politics invited Crockett to deliver a lecture on democratic discourse in the digital age. The London School of Economics announced they would be hosting a symposium on the Crockett effect: How Preparation Changes Political Communication. Universities in Canada, Australia, and the European Union began studying the exchange as an example of effective democratic leadership. Most significantly, the moment seemed to mark a generational shift in how young people viewed political engagement. Political science departments reported increased enrollment. Young Democrats across the country began running for local office, citing Crockett's example as inspiration. Campaign training organizations noted a surge in requests for fact-based opposition research and crisis communication preparation. If this analysis of political courage and preparation inspired you, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification. We'll be following Jasmine Crockett's rising career and bringing you more stories of politicians who choose substance over spectacle. Comment below and let us know, do you think this marks a real shift in American political discourse, or was it just one exceptional moment? The future of American politics may depend on how many people follow Crockett's example of coming prepared, staying calm, and letting facts speak louder than fury. And based on what we've seen so far, that future looks brighter than ever.